Hi, I'm Debbie and welcome to Book Kombucha, where I talk about all things books, bullet journals, and stationery. Today we are going through my very late April wrap-up. As always, stats first and then the books. To start out with, I read 25 books. I had 21 on my TBR, and then I participated in 3 different readathons. I also participated in 2 readalongs, 5 book clubs, and I had 1 reread. I read 8,440 pages, which is not my best, but not my worst either. And I listened to 209.5 hours of audiobooks. First book I read was Saga, Volume 5, and I did read the physical book of that one this time from my library, and that was a lot of fun. I definitely prefer physical books for the graphic novels as opposed to the ebooks. The last book I started but did not finish in April was The Prophet of Edan, so I did start it, but I did finish it in May. My least favorite books of the month were actually a tie, with both of them having a compile of 5.43, and that was Vampire Academy, Crestview High School, and that's by Emily Clark. And it's not that it wasn't good, it just was very unfinished. They're missing a lot of chunks in the middle. You have a good beginning, you have a decent end, but the middle is needed work. And then the other one is The Fairy Godmother and Other Tales by Mrs. Alfred Gaddy. It's a children's book, and it's a classic children's book, so I tend to have more issues with some of those, but I thought I'd give it a try, and overall it wasn't too bad, but I've definitely read worse, but it wasn't my favorite. Ratings. I had 0 1-star and 0 2-star, which is always good. Always means it's a decent month. I had a total of 5 3-star, but at least 2 of those were 3.5 stars, so a little better. 16 were 4-star and 5 5-star books, which is amazing, especially since I read 25 books. I'm glad at least 5 of them are 5-star. My average rating was 4.1, which is excellent, and holding on par pretty well with my previous month. So I did purchase 8 books from Amazon, which I did not read in April, but no, that's not true. 7 of them I did not read in April. The 8th one was an audiobook, and that was Of Darkness and Light, and I did listen to that one whilst reading my ebook, and that was the only way I finished that book in time. I did get into the tier 2 of The Broken Binding, and I believe it was in March. We got The Lies of Laclamora, and so the second book, Red Seas Under Red Skies, I should be getting soon. What else did I buy? Also from The Broken Binding, I splurged. Really shouldn't have, but I splurged, which is also why I didn't want to purchase any other audiobooks to try and finish my TBR. The Broken Binding is doing an edition of The Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu, and I am so excited to read that series. I've heard so many good things about it, and FOMO got me, and I could not go without getting that series. So I have pre-ordered that series. Right, source. How did I read my books? So I had 1 physical book, 4 just audiobooks, 6 digital or ebooks, and I had 14 mixed media books, so ebook and audiobook or physical book and audiobook, which is typically how I read my books now. I love having the audiobook and then checking out the physical book from my library. It's just been so much fun. So for mixed media, I did have 9 physical book / audiobooks and 5 with the ebook and audiobook format. So I did read 2 graphic novels, 1 short story, and 22 novels. For audience, I had 2 children's books, 1 middle grade, 5 YA, 1 new adult, and 16 adult books. I did get 10 physical books from my library, 1 digital book, which was one of my graphic novels, and then I had 9 audiobooks from my library. And again, some of those were the physical book and the audiobook. I got both from the library, and some were on their own. Series. How did I do a series? 8 standalone books, 1 short story, 8 series that I started. So I started 8 more series, but I did continue with 8 series, and I did not complete any. That's a bummer, but at least I did continue on with multiple series, so that's good. That's a win. All right, genres. Of course, 15 fantasy, 1 contemporary, 1 classic, 3 romance, 3 nonfiction, which is nice because I'm trying to read more nonfiction, and 1 mystery. I did read 1 debut in April, and then 12 new to me authors and 12 authors that I've read from before, which is kind of nice. It's nice, almost 50-50 split on that. I read 10 traditional published books, 10 indie published books, and 5 self-published. The shortest book I read was Vampire Academy Crestview High School by Emily Clark, and that was 47 pages. The shortest audiobook I listened to was Breach of Peace by Daniel B. Green, and that was 3¼ hours. The longest book I read was Of Darkness and Light, which was a reread by Ryan Cahill, and that was 828 pages. And the longest audiobook I listened to was Dragonfall by David Estes, and that was just over 28 hours. Publication dates ranged from 1851 to 2023. There's no rhyme or reason to it, but it is kind of fun to see the colors of books that I read. In April, I did read 11 books with diversity, 9 LGBTQIA+, and 4 own voices. So I did have 44% of my reads had diversity in them, which was very nice. And then again, 22 fiction and 3 nonfiction books. Other stats that are kind of interesting, especially if you're trying to like read around the world, where the authors came from for all of the books that I read, which typical for me, 5 from the UK, 16 from the United States, 1 from India, 1 from Ireland, 1 unknown, and then 1 various. So they are various authors, and I'm not sure where each of them were from. And that was from Sensory, a graphic novel. And each story in there was by a different author. But we'll get into that when we get to the books. All right, some of my favorites for April. My favorite character was Avon Green from Dusty Bowling's Insignificant Events in the Life of a Cactus. I just loved her spirit, her optimism, not letting life get her down, and all the struggles that she had to go through, and just her family there to support her and not let her wallow in self-pity and telling her to get back out there. I really appreciated that character. My favorite book was my highest rated book as well, and that was Shade's First Rule by AFK, and this is the first book in the Divine Apostasy series. So much fun. I just enjoyed myself so much reading that book. Top place was a tie between 2 books, but the second book was a reread, so I don't count those in my top ratings because I would have already probably counted it when I originally read it. But that was Of Darkness and Light by Ryan Cahill, the second book in the Bound and the Broken series. My favorite audiobook narrator is kind of a tie. I absolutely love Timothy Gerard Reynolds. I think he is amazing and so talented, especially doing other voices. They are so distinct, like you can tell which character it is. I just feel like he really gets into each character, and that is conveyed through the way he narrates. And the other one is Derek Perkins, who also is an excellent audiobook narrator, and again puts everything he has into the narration. Now, my favorite author, I'm going to go with ones that I have not used in the past because we already know I love David Estes, I love Ryan Cahill, and I've got some favorites. But for this month, I have 2 honorable mentions. We'll do those really quick. So Dusty Bowling, which I have gushed about in previous months. I love her writing. That was Insignificant Events in the Life of a Cactus. Love her writing. And the other honorable mention goes to AFK, which is Shade's First Rule, because I just had so much fun with that book, and it was very entertaining, it was hilarious, and I just thoroughly enjoyed myself. But the winner, I'm kind of sensing a trend here. I'm this month for April, I was really into more of the lighthearted comedic books that I had, and this is Renee George, and I read the 3rd book in the Grimoires of a Middle-Aged Witch series, and the book was When the Spell Blows. And I don't know if it's just because I'm kind of in that middle-aged category and I just could relate to it, and especially some of the pop culture references and just the snarkiness, and it's just so much fun. Loving Renee George right now, and when I'm done with this series, I gotta see what else she has to read. My favorite movie for April, my husband and I rewatched The Hunger Games, and it was a lot of fun. You got a little bit of that nostalgia factor. We still had some really nice nights with some popcorn in those movies. All right, my favorite series. I would say it's a tie, but it's not really a tie. So my honorable mention is It Cake? Oh my gosh, that is just so much fun. So much fun. And The Host. He does such an amazing job. He rides the line of the cheese factor and like being real. Whenever that comes out, we always watch it. But The Winner, I was so excited when we finished watching season 1. We're like, oh, what if there's gonna be another season? And like the next week, season 2 came out. We're like, yes! So we totally binged both seasons, and that is Physical 100. I've mentioned before that I am not really a sports person. I don't really enjoy watching sports that much, but what I do enjoy watching is competitions, and especially CrossFit. Physical 100, the narrator or the voiceover guy is, I'm pretty sure it's the same guy as the Squid Game. I did not double check that, but it sounds a lot like the guy from the Squid Game. So that made it kind of interesting too. But if you've ever watched Sylvester Stallone's Ultimate Beastmaster, then you probably like Physical 100 as well. So basically they take 100 like super fit people. All of the contestants are from Korea, and they have to go through physical competitions. So the first episode is 50 of them stay and 50 of them get cut. And so it's this big like, oh my gosh moment. And then they keep whittling it down over each episode until you're down to the one person. And it was just so interesting just seeing how fit some people are and the different skills that shine at different times. So you may have a rock climber, you may have a stunt person for movies, a CrossFitter, a bodybuilder, wrestlers, and how each of those gifts really relate to different areas of fitness. And they also have to work as teams, so they get into teams of like 5 or 6 for a couple of the episodes, which is kind of interesting too. And it was very fun. If you've not checked out Physical 100 on Netflix, check it out. A book or something that made me think. And for this one, I'm definitely going with A Sensory Life on the Spectrum. So that graphic novel just really got my brain thinking and broadening my horizons, I guess you would say, and thinking out of the box and out of my comfort zone and all of that, and learning some new things. So I really enjoyed that one. The 25 books I read in April. I will try and keep this as short as possible because there'd be a lot of books here. So I pretty much finished all of the books on my TBR but one, and that was The Prophet of Edan. And I wasn't even a quarter of the way through the book before the end of the month. I basically started on April 28th, so I had like pretty much a day and a half to read the book, so I didn't get too far into it. And if you want to check out my April Readathon wrap-up, I will leave that linked up in the cards above and also in the description box down below. So how did you do on your readathons for April? Did you participate in the magical readathon? Did you pass your classes, or did you get held up by doing some of the quests and other fun side things that you could do? I also participated in the Autism Acceptance Readathon, which was amazing, and I will leave all the channels linked down below for that as well. But I did complete 3 of the 4 books for that one. You only had to complete 1, but I did get 3 of them done. And then Tomes and Treasures, which I will also leave linked down below if you want to check out that readathon. I am happy to say I completed that one as well as the magical readathon. I actually did the side quest and was able to complete that one as well, just from books that were on my TBR that had not gotten into the magical readathon for my coursework. So that turned out okay. All right, let's just go down the list on how I read the books, like the first book I read to the last one. So first up was Saga Volume 5 by Brian K. Vaughan, and I'm having so much fun continuing with this series. And again, I had this one physically checked out from my library, and it was a lot more fun that way, and I will definitely continue doing that going forward. So Saga is basically a epic space opera graphic novel series with 10 or 11 books. I want to say there's 11. There might only be 10. I think there's 11 books in the series, and I just finished volume 5. So Saga, I gave 4 stars. Next up was my other graphic novel, and that was Sensory Life on the Spectrum, and that was put together by Rebecca Allerton, and that is a group of autistic authors that basically told their story in comic form, and it was super fun and very informative. I really enjoyed it. I definitely learned quite a bit. I was able to relate to quite a few of the stories and not so much with some of the others. It was nice to learn some of the terminology and just get a little more familiar with autism itself. I would definitely recommend it. And a non-fiction book in comic form. How can you pass that up? Sensory Life on the Spectrum, I gave 4.5 stars. Next up, I read Winter's Heart by Robert Jordan, and that is the 9th book in the Wheel of Time series. I feel like this book focused mostly on Rand and Perrin, and the pace is a little slower than normal, which is pretty slow to begin with, so just keep that in mind if you're going into this one and just realize it's going to be a little bit slower. But there's also some really good action and battle scenes in there for you to kind of spice it up as you go along. And there are also some very impactful moments. Still gave it a 4-star. Next up, The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, and that is by Songu Mandana. And I did give that one 4.5 stars. This one was so heartwarming and just family friendly. Next up, Monstrous Regiment by Terry Pratchett, the 31st book in the Discworld series, and I gave that one 4 stars. This one was a hoot. So Monstrous Regiment is a bunch of people signing up to go into the military because, of course, there's always war somewhere. And one of them happens to be a young girl that decides to dress up as a boy in order to join this regiment so that she could find her brother, who is also in the military and has been missing, and find out what's happened to him. Little does she know, there's others in her regiment that may be keeping other secrets, kind of like she is. It was just so much fun. Shade's First Rule by AFK, the first book in the Divine Apostasy series. I did have this one on an ebook that I borrowed from Amazon, so the Prime Reading I call Amazon Borrows, and it was just so entertaining. I had so much fun with this one. It's an RPG, so role-playing game style book, but I love the beginning of it. Just Ruin gets to die for the first time. Finally. What is happening? Why are you so excited about dying? Like, what? You're like, what, 16 or 15? Something like that? Super young. Sounds a little weird. But then you keep going. This is going to be his ascension day, but things aren't really going how they're supposed to. And when he revives, again, interesting, what? He's got to figure out what's happening and why things aren't as they should be. The world building is really interesting, and the magic system is very intriguing. It's definitely fun, so this is definitely where the role-playing kind of comes in. You get to level up in your magic and your knowledge and wisdom, like all of that kind of stuff, which is kind of fun. And this is also a chosen one trope. I do like how the character starts to grow, so they're building in some character growth. It's nice to see that happening in the book along with all of the other fun and shenanigans. Shade's First Rule, of course, I gave 5 stars. Next was The Dangerous Book for Boys, and this is by Conan at Hal Iggulden. This was fun. I had the physical book for my library, and there's like twice as much stuff in the physical book as there is in the audiobook. So I was listening to the audiobook, and I went through all the different things in the book that were on the audiobook, and then I went through all the things that weren't in there in the physical book. So there's things like that don't translate well necessarily into the audiobook, like how to skip a rock, how to play poker, how to build a kite, how to build a tree house. So those kind of things weren't necessarily in the audiobook, but they did include things like things all boys should know, like a basic first aid, and the 7 wonders of the ancient world, 7 wonders of the modern world, 7 poems you should know, significant historical figures, the Wright brothers on Napoleon, and a whole bunch of other people in history. So it was just so much fun. It was like a little encyclopedia that included games and useful information and historical stuff and poems, and yeah, it was just so interesting. It's definitely a good coffee table book, one that you would just flip through each week and find a different little section to read, and each of the sections are pretty short, so such a good time. And I actually learned some things. The Dangerous Book for Boys, 4 stars. Next was another Prime Reading book, and that was The Seventh Bride by T. Kingfisher, and I enjoyed this one a lot as well. So we have a young girl that is getting close to the age when girls are starting to get married, which way back when was a lot younger than it is now. And this much older gentleman, who could have been the age of her father, decides he wants to marry her, but she needs to go through some tests first, so he has her go to his house, and when she gets there, she is greeted at the door by his wife. What? She finds out that there are 6 other wives, pretty much all still living in the house. So she would be the 7th bride. And she has to go through some tests. And at the end of the test, if she passes, then she gets the chance to win her freedom, so to speak. And if she fails, then she pretty much that next week she has to marry him. So she goes along through the trials and she finds some unexpected friends and help. It was interesting, enjoyable, and a quick and easy read. The 7th Bride was 4.5 stars, and The Breach of Peace was 4 stars. So The Breach of Peace by Daniel B. Green is the first book, or a kind of a prequel novella to the Lawful Times series, and it was a quick read and very interesting. So a political and police fantasy. So we have kind of some cops that are working on a case in this fantasy world, and you gotta kind of follow the clues and try and figure out who's who and what's happening. And it was very entertaining, very fast-paced, and I am looking forward to reading the first book in the series to find out a little bit more. Next up, Hatful of Sky, the 32nd book in the Discworld series and the 2nd book in the Tiffany Aching series, and I gave that one 4 stars. So again, we're following Tiffany Aching and her realizing that she can leave her body behind and go do other things. It's a very handy skill when you want to do some eavesdropping, but not so good when there's another entity out there that is looking for a vacant body to inhabit. All right, book 11, Insignificant Events in the Life of a Cactus by Dusty Bowling, and this is the first book in the Avon Green series, and I gave this one 5 stars. I just thoroughly enjoyed this. It takes on some hard topics. So the main character is born without any arms, and her struggles with dealing with that, growing up all in the same town all the way up through, junior high, and by then everybody knows who she is, so nobody's staring or asking like, where'd your arms go? What happened to your arms? Or anything like that. But then she moves and she has to deal with all that stuff all over again, which she hasn't had to deal with since like kindergarten. Her parents move and they get a job at Stagecoach Pass, where this little mystery is taking place in Avon Green, and her 2 buddies that she has befriended from school, one of them with Tourette's, and the other one is a boy that's very insecure and has a low self-esteem. And so the 3 of them kind of get together and become buddies and try and solve this mystery. And I do have to say, I don't come across very many books that deal with Tourette's, and I feel like it was dealt with very nicely in this book. It's very entry level, so you really just get the surface of it, but I think it's handled very well, and it definitely opened my eyes a little bit, and I learned something from it as well. Next up, The Art of Non-Conformity by Chris Gubo, and this one I gave 3.5 stars. When I was reading it, I thought there was some really good information, and I really enjoyed it, but then at this point, I did not retain a lot of that information, so I think it was good, but not great. Book number 13 was Peace and Turmoil by Elliot Brooks, and this is the first book in the Dark Shores series, and I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I gave it 4.5 stars. It's about 750 pages, so it took me most of the month to read it, which is why I definitely did not finish The Prophet of Edan, and I did not even pick up The Girl on the Moon by Mark Lawrence, but that's for another day. So I think the characters are super interesting, and the magic system is also very intriguing, and I want to learn a little bit more about it. This is definitely more of an epic high fantasy where you have a bunch of different groups of people. So you have people from this land and this land and this land, and some of them hate each other, some of them get along, and there's war and slavery and all of that interesting stuff that happens in dark fantasies. I highly recommend it, and it sounds like she may be getting to start writing the 2nd book soon. So hopefully in the next year or 2 we will get the 2nd installment. Next up, we have Vampire Academy Crestview High School by Emily Clark. And I will leave a link up in the cards and down in the description box below of my thoughts on this from a previous video. But overall, it was good. The story is very interesting. Like, I want more, but there just wasn't more in the book. So you have a basic start to the book. So it felt like an outline for a really good story. So you have the basic start, and then you have some stuff that happens in the middle, and then you have kind of a not quite satisfying ending. Like, it kind of wrapped things up, but not with enough information to really know, like, okay, and they were done. And you're like, but how is it done? Like, what happened with this, and where was that, and what's going on with that? And so it felt more like a short story outline for a big novel as opposed to what this was. So it was very interesting, and I wanted to know a little bit more. The characters were okay, but the plot line and the story and everything was where the interesting stuff was. The somewhat magic system that was in the magic that was in there. But yeah, it was okay. 3 stars. Next up, my reread of Darkness and Light by Ryan Cahill, and this is the second book in the Bound and the Broken series. And again, I just love this series, and I love this book. I am amazed at how much I remembered from the first time I read it. So I read it in the first week of January of 2023, and I still remembered pretty much everything that was going to happen, and it was super enjoyable. And Derek Perkins is a great narrator. 5 stars. Next up, All of Us Villains by Amanda Foody and Christine Lynn Henry. This one I gave 4.5 stars. It's got the game aspect to it, so like a Hunger Games type of storyline. And it was just so interesting. The magic system was interesting. I mean, the characters were good. They weren't anything groundbreaking, but they were interesting enough to continue the story along. And you had a couple of the characters that you wanted to get behind a little bit and champion, and a couple others that you were like, yeah, no, you can go away. Which book number 17, getting close. The Trouble with Peace by Joe Abercrombie, the second book in the Age of Madness series. So I love in the description of this book, it says, the choices we make can be good or bite us in the butt and regret forever. So again, with Joe Abercrombie, Roar, Betrayals, Unexpected Allies. Very good book. I thoroughly enjoyed this series, and I'm thinking I may possibly like it better than the first Law trilogy. Not sure yet. We still have one more book to go. Next up, When the Spell Blows by Renee George, the third book in the Grimoires of Middle-Aged Witch series. I am thoroughly enjoying this series. It's just fun, it's lighthearted. I guess you would call it a popcorn read, a guilty pleasure, a palate cleanser, any of those. It's just entertaining. You have magic. So this middle-aged woman has gotten divorced. Her ex-husband has now remarried to her son's gym coach. And she is just trying to find herself and get back on her feet again after all of this turmoil. And then she realizes she may have magic. And now she's got to figure out what's going on with all of that and be able to control the magic before it kills her. So 4.5 stars. Next up, we have Last Call by John Robinson. And I had no idea what this book was going to be about. I knew it was Christian fiction, and that was about it. So we start the first couple chapters, and we're in the Vietnam War. I'm like, whew. This is going to be interesting. So I usually don't do a lot of like real world war stuff because it's a little heavy just knowing that this happened, as opposed to fantasy with the magic and all of that. It's a little easier not to let it affect you as much. But yeah, the only other real Vietnam War time book that I've read was Apocalypse Now, which I had to read for college. But after the first couple chapters, we fast forward 40 years. And the main characters, 2 of them are still best friends. One of them works for the other one, who owns a plastics company that makes things like the little tips on the end of your shoelaces. Little random things like that of plastics. That's what this company makes. And they are still working together. So the buddy from his team or regiment in Vietnam is his security officer, and they both go to the same church. Their families are buddies, and the church all hears during this time of prayer. They all seem to hear this week, and they realize that the rapture is going to be coming sometime that week, and you better get ready. So these guys decide that they want to get together with everyone from their old regiment and make sure that they are right with the Lord. And so this is the story of their journey during this 1 week time period to go visit each of the members of their team or regiment, and they are actually all still living, which is amazing, and they go and visit all of them, and it's just a really interesting, very heartwarming story. Yeah, it was a lot better than I thought it was going to be, especially from the beginning of the book. How it started out, it was a little strong at the beginning. But next up, The Remaking of Corbin, Wale by Roan Parrish. This was just another heartwarming and sweet book, and I thoroughly enjoyed it for the most part. There was a lot of steaminess in this book. So there's a few books that I had that I was just like, oh my gosh, and blushing like crazy. Yeah, I'm not a steamy book girl. I can handle a little steam here and there, but skimming through some of those scenes, it was still just heartwarming. Alex is the main character and just has such a heart on that character. Such an amazing character. So he is with a longtime boyfriend, and he realizes that the boyfriend pretty much has their future all planned out for them, and he was like, wait, what? I don't know if I want any of that. I don't know if I'm ready for that, and yeah, we don't want the same things anymore. So they end up breaking up. He moves back home. His dad had a coffee shop, and after his dad passed away, his mom was running the shop, and he ended up getting the shop then from his mom, who basically retired, and he turned it into a little bakery. And he meets Corbin Wale there, who likes to come in and gets a cup of coffee, and he sits in a booth and just kind of sketches for a few hours, and that's about it. He doesn't want to talk to anybody. He keeps his head down. And Alex remembers him from school because they went to high school together, and he befriends Corbin Wale. And come to find out, he is a very talented artist, and he does like to learn, so Alex kind of takes him under his wing a little bit, and they become friends. So Alex has this gift for making others feel wanted and important. And I do love Alex's best friend from New York, who is super snarky. I love it. Just says what's on his mind and just puts it out there. But you can't get mad at him because he's such a nice guy that you know he means well. The other thing I love about this book is all of the work that Corbin puts in to become the person he wants to be. Very inspiring. Next up, another of my 5-star reads, and that is Dragonfall, the second book in the Kingfall History series by David Estes. I love this series. I love his Fate Mark series, like I've been talking nonstop about. But the Kingfall Histories is also so good. High epic fantasy. We've got dragons and dragon riders. This one is a little bit shorter than the other books in the series. It's only 582 pages. The other ones are all closer to 7 and above. But it reads very quickly. So we have war, there's political intrigue, you have slaves, you have the tyrant kings, and very interesting characters. I love how many different POVs there are, but you don't get lost in them. So they're very distinct. You know exactly who they are. And I love that each section, so like part 1, and it gives a list of all the characters that are going to be in that part. And then each chapter tells you who's going to be in each section of that chapter. So before each section, it tells you, okay, now Dane is going to be talking. So it starts out with Dane, and then we have Dane's point of view, and then we have Peony, and then we have Gerard, and then we have Samson, and we have Roman for your helm, and yeah, so many POVs, but they all intersect somehow with each other, and each of their storylines is so interesting, and you get so invested in each of the storylines and how they're all coming together. So good. He's very talented, and of course the amazing Timothy Gerard Reynolds is the audiobook narrator. 5 stars. Only 4 left to go. Book number 22, The Fairy Godmothers and Other Tales by Mrs. Alfred Gaddy. This book is, I believe, from 1851. It's a classic fairy tale style short story collection. And the first one, I'm reading it and I'm thinking, is this Sleeping Beauty? Is it a Sleeping Beauty retelling? But no, it's 3 fairy godmothers, and also you have similar names. So like the main character I think is Aurora. I think that's why I was thinking it was going to be Sleeping Beauty, but it's not. The characters are all interesting, but there's just aspects of the story I just don't enjoy. So it was good, but not great. I mean, it was much better than the Book of Dragons that I read in March, I do have to say. 3 stars. Book number 23, another ebook, and this one got 3.5 stars, and that is How Sweet It Is by Bonnie Blythe. This one was a sweet little YA romance that at times was okay and at other times was really good. I think there were parts of it that were a little drawn out, and other parts you get that miscommunication in there, the kind where you're just like, oh my gosh, just talk to each other, people, which I don't enjoy all the time. So it was good and a little frustrating at times as well. So this is a sweet Christian romance. So we have these two characters that meet by happenstance in, I believe they're in Belgium. She's there for a chocolate learning class. She wants to open a candy store basically featuring chocolates, and then he is there with his parents. His parents are on a business trip. He is done with college and it's kind of like the summer before he has to like dig in and actually get a job. And they meet by chance and he steals a little kiss. She slaps him because of course, hello, I don't know you, don't just come up and kiss me. And then that's it. They say goodbye, and who knows if they'll ever meet again. And then they do. The story kind of picks up from there. Another chance meeting, and they realize they live like within an hour of each other. And then of course they continue to talk with one another and a little romance ensues. Next up was The Princess Trap by Talia Hibbert, and I gave this one 4 stars. Another super cute, super fun fake fiance trope, and again, a little steamy, very steamy. So I love the concept where you have this visiting dignitary who happens to be a prince, and you have this nobody who happens to work in HR at this school that he's visiting to provide scholarships for underprivileged kids to get higher education. And there's a chance meeting, and then there's a little steamy getting it on in an alley, and photographers and paparazzi come by, and since he's part of a prince, a part of the royal family, he says, hey, she's my fiance, so that means they are not allowed to print any pictures of them at all. Of course, his brother the king finds out, and then, you know, he's got to meet this fiance, and then things get real. It's hilarious, it's super fun, it's interesting, and again, guilty pleasure, popcorn read, and quick and easy to get through. It'll pick your mood up and get you right out of any slump you may be in. And then lastly, I had Imperfect Magic by Cian Rowan, and this is the first book in the imPerfect Cathar series. And on paper, this sounds right up my alley and a book that I would absolutely love, and I just thought it was okay. I think maybe at this point I was burnt out. This was the 25th book on my TBR that I read for April. It was the last few days of April that I was reading it. I listened to the audiobook as well. It's narrated by the author. I feel like the beginning, the first part of the book, the narration of the audiobook is a little awkward. He does kind of get into his own and gets into the swing of it, and it's much better as you keep going. But the first, quarter to a third of the book, it was a little awkward. The story itself is kind of interesting. There's time travel, and every time you die, you come back at a different point in time, most likely in the same spot. This is kind of the time of World War II with Hitler and the Nazis, and just, I don't know if my brain couldn't get into enough. So if you look at most of the other reviews, like, people love this book. So I'm pretty sure it was just me and the headspace I was in at the time when I was reading it. I definitely do want to read the second book at a different time, and maybe earlier in the month instead of having it be the last book I read, and see if that helps a little bit, because it was really interesting. I just had a tough time getting into it. So that was my TBR for April, all 25 books. That was a lot. I did complete all 3 of my readathons, which was great, with at least the minimum of what was required for each of them. And I did complete most of my TBR-obbly TBR. I just missed out on 1 book, but hopefully it won't take this long to get my May recap up. If you made it this far in the video, leave a book stack emoji for the mass amount of books that I read in April. And please like, comment, and subscribe if you want to, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any other videos from me. And until next time, keep reading. Bye.